in no rush. Okay, I'd like to open the Architectural Board of Review for today, October 18th, 2010, in a little bit of a disco atmosphere. Starting with general business, public comment, seeing no one that would like to approach the board on an item not on the agenda, I'll close that portion and bring it back to the approval of the minutes of the ABR of Monday, October 4th. Can I have a motion to open those minutes? First by Clay, second by? Second by Chris. Okay, do we have any comment before item 1? Item 1, 2.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Chris.
On item 2 under landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to maybe clarify that first one a little bit.
Okay.
I guess maybe change it to say restudy the entry walk from Cottage Road.
Okay.
To reduce the straight lines and the rigidity. Just doesn't quite make sense the way it's said there.
Okay. All right. Item 3. Anything for item? All right. So and then we item 4 and 5 is really postponed items. Item 6. Okay. Item 7. Good. All those in favor of the minutes as reviewed, say aye. Aye. Against, motion carries. So we have, then we'll do a consent calendar for October 11th. Motion to open those minutes. First by Chris, second by? Clay. And let staff read those out. Oh. Consent?
Mr. Chair, we did not have a consent calendar today.
This is reviewing the, for October 11th. We're not reviewing that one?
The minutes?
Yes. Yeah. You could use one of these, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Mr. Chair, the items
Yeah.
for October 11th ABR consent meeting are the following. Item A, 900 block Calle Puerto Vallarta was final approval with conditions. Item B, 199 North Hope Avenue, final approval with conditions. It's noted on plans. Item number C, which is a review after final for 1929 Cliff Drive. That was final approval for these review after final changes. And item D, 3025 Delavina Street, was another review after final, and that was preliminary approval. The items were reviewed by Gary Moselle, with landscaping reviewed by Chris Gillian.
Okay, thanks. All those in favor of the minutes as reviewed, say aye. Aye. Against, the motion carries. Thanks. And that would now bring us to item D for any announcements, requests by applicants for continuances and withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Keith.
I'll be leaving early today after item 2.
Okay, thanks, Keith. And
Mr. Chair, I'll be stepping
Paul?
down from item 2.
Thanks, Paul. Anything from staff?
No changes to today's agenda, Mr. Chair, but I do have one announcement that I want to give the board an update on.
Mm-hmm.
We were at, our planning staff was at the ordinance committee
Yes.
on October 12th, and we were there to deal with various ordinance amendments, and I think I sent out an email explaining the sign committee reconstitution, and we're actually going to talk about two of the items that were going to impact the ABR with respect to time approval, timelines and expirations, and preliminary approval, which is now being proposed to change to project design approval. But I wanted to report to you that we had a lot of public testimony provided, and there were some objections with respect to some new ordinance language on for sale signs and open house signs. The realtors came out, wanted to have an exemption to allow more, as opposed to only allowing 3 right now. If you see them on the corners, they actually would like to have up to 7. I don't know where we're going to end up at, but I just wanted to let you know that they had some objection to that language of limiting them to some degree. And also, there was something that was continued, primarily dealing with television monitors, although we actually went in and proposed new definitions for just keeping up with the technology. We now have LCD screens and television monitors, and we thought it was very important to delineate that those are in fact signs, and we don't want them on gas pumps and other creative locations. And also there's projection of signs on buildings at night that are being placed throughout the city, and folks are arguing whether they are signs because they're not visible during the day. Where are they? So these are the things that are going to be discussed. I know Don, who represents you on the sign committee, is aware of some of the changes, but I thought it was important, since there seems to be some movement to maybe relax some of these signage standards, that either this board take a position on it or you direct Don to represent this board on your position on those things. I know when I mentioned it to the Historic Landmarks Commission last week, they felt strong enough to actually draft a memorandum to the ordinance committee to indicate that they strongly support that these provisions be placed in it, so the city has some oversight over that. So I don't know how you want to deal with that issue, but that's what's going to happen with the Historic Landmarks Commission.
Can we get a copy of their memorandum to see what it looks like?
Sure.
See what their thoughts are. Kind of
Right.
thing? And then at what point do we have? Right now we have Dawn, who goes up and is dealing with that issue all the time. But at one point we should discuss it among ourselves so that we could decide where we want to go with it.
Sure. I mean, the fact is that the way the proposed ordinance amendments and reconstitution of the sign ordinance, you will be hearing some sign applications. So therefore, if it's coming to you either directly or through an appeal, you have sentiments with respect to how signage is done in the city. So, and if you want certain exemptions to be in play or not to be exempted, then certainly this board has a position that could carry forward.
Okay, so if we have the Brown Act issue, is that something that we should put on our agenda for the next meeting?
Well, the way that the HLC handled it is there was basically a quick assessment. Do you support the chair writing something to support these amendments? And they concurred, and so therefore she's going to work with staff to draft a letter to the ordinance committee. Now the ordinance committee was tentatively scheduled for next week, but now we've continued it on to the November 6th hearing, I think. So we do have some more time to deal with that. I don't think you need necessarily a long discussion unless you want to get some initial sentiments of whether if there's mixed sentiments about whether we should support those proposals or not.
Okay, let me think here. Dawn, do you have anything that you'd like to add, since you've kind of been on the leading edge of this? Or?
Yeah, it's actually not black and white. It's not, for me, very clear cut. And my first impression before I talked to Jaime was that, and one of the issues that came up that he didn't bring up was the issue of balloons in planters and balloons on car lots, arches and things like that. And my first impression was that balloons are not signs. They're identifying markers of a business. And then my also first impression was that monitors in gas pumps were not signs. But there's it's arguable that they are, and if you look at the definition of what a sign is, or what is the definition of a sign. So it's not clear cut for me. And I think that, I mean, my revised sort of opinion on that as of last week was that if monitors are going to be proposed on gas pumps, they should be reviewed. Not necessarily that there would be a blanket ordinance against them, that if it's a sign like anything else, it could be reviewed. Because
that is the current proposal, that they be reviewed.
Okay, because it does get into like the size. Like, okay, if monitors are allowable, then at what size are they allowed?
Right.
And then if it's a really, really small monitor and you can only see it from 2 feet away, it makes it a completely different ballgame than something you can see from across the street. And then the same goes for balloons. Like if somebody puts a few balloons in a planter, it's a completely different thing than big arches of balloons on car lots. So to me, I think my opinion as the representative of this board up until this point, without knowing yours, was just that it should be reviewed on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
So.
And just a little sidelight to the visual monitor, there's also an audio segment to that. So some people find it annoying that these are now being used for advertising. Not only you get visual, but you get the audio that isn't regulated, and therefore those are the two types of concerns that would come forward with these. And although some have the ability to turn it off, it does take some effort to have to go find them.
Not a lot of people are going to do that.
Right. And one of the things that's actually being promoted as a positive is, and they're bringing forward these folks, they allow public service announcements to be included as a percentage of those announcements. So you get service organizations and emergency type communication that could be given as part of that, and that's one of their selling points.
Right.
That it's unknown as to what the percentage of what public service announcement is versus private sales of advertising, where you could have off-site businesses actually also doing their television and sort of advertisements. So that's where I think we're drawing the line.
Okay. I mean, personally, I think it I think it could be a potential problem, all these different things. So I agree with Dawn that it should be regulated, but it's I think it's a significant enough item that the board should make a statement about it. And so with that, I'd like to be able to also give the members of the board an ability to voice what they think should be in that statement. And I'm trying to figure out how do I get that forum and discussion going so that I could call that into something that they can approve and we could present. And
well, the timing is a little awkward, but we could conceivably be before you again and have it reviewed on an agenda, so you could have it discussed if you want. If they don't want to give you that authority to go forward without the review.
Yeah, I mean, even if I were to go forward with something, I would want to disseminate it for them to comment on, and I don't want to get into the whole Brown Act problem and all that.
We can do that with internally where the staff generates the discussion, and we don't have communication. We just have it funneled to one person.
Okay, so I'll just ask the board which would you guys prefer, to have a discussion item here, or would you just like me to see what it is that they have, and we'll prepare a statement, and then Jaime would disseminate it for you guys to review and comment upon individually. I mean, it probably gives you a little, if you get it in your email or something like that, it probably gives you more time to think about it and then decide what it is you want to say, and then just send off 1 or 2 quick messages, as opposed to trying to get everything going in a discussion and us coming to an agreement, because that could take, it sometimes just drags on.
Well, I know for me, I'm one of the people who's extremely annoyed by TV monitors at the gas station.
Yeah.
But I think, like the first thing you said, it would be nice to have a little time to think about it before we respond, or maybe respond with a couple of lines via email.
Well, what we could do, Jaime, this is my suggestion then, is that I'm going to ask the board to give me the authority to first find out what all these details are, and then put out what I think might be there, and I can give it back to you, and you could pass it around to everybody, and then collect their comments, and I could revise it to suit the boards.
Okay.
And then we give that out.
That'd be fine.
Okay? Yeah, we know. All right. So that's what we do.
Thanks.
Thanks. So where am I? So subcommittee reports. Okay, I don't think we have any. So so Jaime, was that first discussion item? Or is that something else?
This is something else.
Okay, so we have the first discussion item of the evening: Architectural Board of Review rules, meeting procedures, and guidelines.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
this discussion item is, I believe we've been given about 30 minutes, and I believe we can get through some of the discussion points that I'd like to raise today to give you an idea of the type of changes that are being proposed in your guidelines. The primary purpose of updating these guidelines is twofold. One is to make the language consistent with other design guidelines that we've updated, meaning your other design review boards. And then the second component is really the ordinance amendments that have either been passed or proposed to be amended, and those are the two that I want to focus on. But what I did is I'm going to pass these out in portions so we can sort of take little bits and bites of the guidelines so you can sort of we can zero in on the different changes of different parts. And I think that would be easier than trying to put them all out in discussion. And I'd like to sort of target you on areas that either you could comment on now or you can red mark and return back to me. What I'd like to do is, in the future, put it back on after I've incorporated everyone's comments for an actual recommendation to council to adopt them.
Okay.
And so your guidelines are a little bit different than the other guidelines of other boards in that we've taken previous shots at looking at these guidelines. So right now they're divided into three parts: the architectural design, landscape design, and meeting procedures. That's not changing. What we do have are amendments to all the portions. What I passed out right now is an initial discussion item that I'd like to talk to you about, which is the introduction to your guidelines. And there's actually some ABR goals that are in the front of your guidelines. And when I discussed this with the Historic Landmarks Commission, they actually recommended some amendments speaking, and those are the ones that I'm going to go over to today on this, and maybe you can quickly give me direction on whether or not you agree. I don't know if you can see this on the board, but I gave you a clean version, so you can read it, but I'm going to show you the version that shows the strikeout. Just open these. Yeah, can you turn off the lights so I can see a little bit better? So if you look at these Architecture Board of Review goals, whoa, not that one, not that one. Put that back. The Historic Landmarks Commissioners, the landscape architects, felt that what was missing in their goals were some mentions of landscape design, that we focused on architecture for some reason. And I've included that statement in part of your goals, so and landscape design was included. And then they thought it was important to address the applicant's role in our process. So this last language, to ensure that the review process is fair and consistent both in policy and implementation, to allow all those that are involved to benefit from the process. That was important for them. So I sort of mimicked that, took the liberty of mimicking that in your ABR guidelines. And I was hoping that you could concur that that's also one of your goals. And if you think that anything's missing, I would be interested in hearing from you about whether or not we should explore revisiting your goals. Can I move on?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, most of this is just cleanup. There's not much of much of change. We're just referencing new language and referencing the guidelines as they speak. So I don't think this information is going to be controversial at all. So with that, I'd like to move to the next section. Mm-hmm. Can we do that?
Yep.
Okay. Part one. I'm going to pass that out now. Pretty good. And I realize this is a very quick review. And the intent here is not necessarily to get all your comments, but actually to recognize where staff has made the edits today. You can go back and make some notes and then submit them for our review. The other thing that the Historic Landmarks Commission felt was necessary is that since some of the language from the ABR was actually, and the Single Family Design Board was being inserted into their guidelines because they often deal with single family residential properties that are historic, we thought it was important for them to have those references in their guidelines also. And so they have a lot of new language that was created by the ABR and the Single Family Design Board, and they'd like to have opportunity to review it. So they created a subcommittee and appointed 2 members to work with staff to go over the language and see if it's appropriate for their review body. So it's a little bit the newer guidelines, which have actually all been written before, and we're just tweaking and making some changes. Okay, so let me get out of this. So what I thought was important in the ABR architectural guidelines, and I think I mentioned this in when I sent the document out to you, is I thought that the real question here was areas without distinctive architecture. I think one of the debates or the discussions that this board has had is what should be the architectural style of the city. And we actually have an appeal, I think, at next week. Or is it tomorrow? I think it's tomorrow. 903 West Mission. We can't talk about that, but in particular, the idea of where there should be a certain style of architecture. And you have 2 comments in here that deal with that. And it deals with the idea of whether there's distinctive architecture in parts of the city and whether there should be a certain style of architecture. That's actually one of your goals. If you were to go back to your goals, there's a statement in there that says to encourage the preservation of pre-1925 Hispanic styles of architecture. Now, that could be interpreted as preserving what you have, but it's also trying to maintain the appearance of those architectural styles in neighborhoods. So my question is, are you comfortable with the current language with respect to architectural styles, or would you like to talk about that and make some changes?
I'll try. Okay, hang on a second. I just taking time to have a read here.
So on 1.2, was massing so important that you put it in twice?
No, that's actually a forming thing. I'm sorry. We're gonna fix that. We were gonna separate it, and anything like that. If you see an error like that, I'd like to have you point it out just to make sure I catch it.
Nothing sticks out for me. I don't know. Anybody else?
Okay. If you're happy with that language, we'll
I will review it.
Say that again. Okay.
I'd like a little more time to review it.
There's actually another section, if I were to show you the next section here. In section 2, it talks about architectural styles. Let me read it. The ABR does not mandate required architectural styles for specific areas or locations. However, consideration should be given to several factors that influence the ABR's preference concerning proposed architectural styles. Factors such as the area's prevailing architectural styles, the compatibility of structure, visibility, are factors which should be considered. One of the ABR's stated goals is to encourage the preservation of 1925 Hispanic styles of architecture. In addition, traditional architectural styles based on the city's Hispanic tradition are preferred at highly visible locations such as the gateway or entry points into the city, hillside development, and locations in close proximity to El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District. And I've actually included the Mission Area Special Design District because I think that was the original intent of that location leading up to the mission. So, again, this is the focus. The previous ABRs, I think, had some concern about contemporary architecture in certain parts of the city. That's really some of the concerns that people might have. And we've talked about transitional areas that they don't have a defined architectural style. There's a mixture of that, and that may be what's happening in certain parts of the city. But
I mean, I think what you just read, 2.2, I read through it, and I think it's sufficient. But
okay,
you know, this might.
If nobody objects to it, we'll move on and keep it as provided.
Yep.
Okay.
Jaime, on this particular one, well, not this particular one, but you haven't included things that, for instance, Milpas Design District or any of the other districts, 101, and all of those have, if you read through those documents, they have particular requirements on them. So would that be included in architectural styles, or?
We could make reference to the fact that there are special design districts that we've created.
I think they should
Okay.
be inclusive because we are, Upper State Street design guidelines have specific rulings and
Okay.
different things, so
That would have an influence on the architectural style selected. So, yeah, we could possibly add some language there. I'm going to place a note saying we could look at that language. Again, depending on how much areas we feel that need some tweaking, I could work at the end. We could decide who worked with staff on the language. That seemed to have worked well on the past when a couple of board members worked with staff to work out the language on some of these. So I'm going to keep notes about where these areas could be looked at. Okay, let me just continue on this side. We've added some language on historical significance because we feel that it needs to be addressed when there's some type of historic property. Most of these properties are going to the Historic Landmarks Commission now. So this is just recognizing that, again, the property owners that propose projects, they should know or consider these factors when they're proposing a project. I'm just going to fly through because I'm going to focus in on, again, the edits to your guidelines. Everything that's not in color has been already approved by this board. This, I think, was something that I think we mentioned previously. I think there was a guideline on affordable multifamily housing units, and we've said where all units are affordable. I think that's one of the considerations that you could take into the total cost of construction of the project. Any comments on that?
I'm trying to find out where you are on this sheet here. Section 5, Section 6.
It's Section 9 for Part 1.
Okay. 9, Part 1.
We're still in the architecture. That's why I thought I'd break it up in parts. And I'm sorry, the pages aren't really all formatted.
Oh, so you're okay. You're 9.1F. Is that it?
Yeah.
9.1F.
1F.
Okay. That's cost consideration for affordable multifamily housing projects?
Right. Now, this policy was adopted by the city on all review projects in the city, and this was just tweaking, making a distinction that nowadays we have projects that might only propose a one affordable unit, and there might be a lot of market rate units, and to not imply that now the whole project needs to somehow have lower standards.
Didn't we, that's that last line there, the expected cost of certain preferred design elements is to be evaluated to maintain the affordability of multifamily residential units. I had a comment on that.
Go.
I mean, I had one.
Did you provide that previously?
Yeah. I sent it in an email.
To Ms. Baker?
Yeah.
Okay, so we didn't incorporate that change?
Yeah, I had a long blurb on that.
Okay.
I mean, it must have been at least a paragraph long.
All right.
And I think that the previous up to housing program policies and procedures is fine. I think that last sentence should be struck.
What I'll do is I'll go back and see if it was council's direction to incorporate that language or it was something that the boards developed. So sometimes council tells us to do something that incorporates the language that they set into play. And so I'll look at what you submitted. I think I have records of what you communicated with Heather, so I'll double check that section and get back to you. Again, this is one we could work with the ABR on looking at the language, how we can amend it. Because I don't want this language to be different in every board's guidance.
Well, I should explain to the other board members. I think why I say that is because that the fact that we do what's in the previous sentence, it does already what the last statement is trying to say. And I think what the last statement says is that it ties the board's hands on whether they can determine what stays and what doesn't stay. So then why are we reviewing it if that is out of our hands?
Well, the way I read it is you can consider that factor. It doesn't necessarily mandate that.
Yeah, but who determines the certain preferred design elements? Who? And if you don't be specific, what you are doing right there is you're making a loophole whereby we do not have the ability to determine which of those elements stay and which do not. And that means we do not have the ability to review that project properly.
No, I don't view it that way. I think it's just allowing this board to be more flexible to maybe reduce some of the embellishments that you would normally require. I mean, it is a lesser standard to some degree.
You know, I don't see that. I think the first portion here, it would be a debate at this board level when an applicant comes and they would say whether something, this costs so much and this costs so much, and the board would debate it, and then they would decide which is really important, which is not, and then they would ease up on some places, or so and so. But once you have that second line in there, you tie the board's hands on their ability to determine, no, we think that this is more important than that. Because if we say that, because you have that last line in there, you then give the other parties outside of this board to say, no, we say this is more important than that, and sorry, it's in here, but this is what we think, and that's that. And either you have to be clear or not put in something that could confuse the whole issue.
Okay. So does everyone agree with that approach to eliminate that last? Does that bring confusion to the matter? I think that's what Chris is suggesting we do. The last sentence in black.
If I may.
Yeah, you may.
I think that the fact that it says the expected cost of certain preferred design elements is to be evaluated is the catching point. That it says it is to be evaluated, as opposed to can be used as a consideration by the ABR. That would maybe change things. There's a lot of wording that you brought up earlier that said can be used as a consideration. And previously you said that as something that the way you just stated it verbally to us, and I think that's the sticking point for Chris.
That is a good point, Dawn. I like that comment.
I'm going to flag this section, and then because again we could stay here a half hour to debate each section, but what I want to know is where we're having some questions on, and that zeroes in our discussion, and then we can work on the language with again hopefully a subcommittee of members.
I think Dawn has a good point.
Yeah.
That's probably what's
getting the confusion. Okay.
Yeah.
We can look at that language. Let's move on here. Okay, now we get to the discussion about administrative approval standards. This is an area where allows the city staff to approve projects, and there's some edits there, but the primary questions we have today is, do you agree with the list as it stands now and some of the changes that are outlined in red? I think we included minor tree removals and landscape alterations because we now have an ordinance that mandates the maintenance of all landscaping on approved projects, multifamily, commercial. So we're going to see more enforcement if folks change out their landscape plan inconsistent with their approvals. And we thought it was important that, let's say if it was one tree or a couple of plants, that the staff could figure out and return those plans to the original approved plans without having to come to the board. So that's why that's been added. We added some additional language on general administrative review standards. Again, if we think the project is consistent in design, we would approve we would approve the design review without an agendized hearing. We would not place on that ABR. Now, some folks might think that we're taking too much of a large step given the quantity of work volume. But I think it actually works well still. That you're not as busy, but we don't want to put a lot of items on the review board if we think it's going to get approved anyways. So this is something that we think should remain. But if you see anything on the list that you have an objection, for example, Historic Landmarks Commission had a question about porches. They thought that porches should not be included, and because those are often the most difficult elements to design. They have some detailing that are very important to include in certain architectural styles. That we thought that, again, some of these projects get designed by architects anyways, so we want to give the ability for architects to also propose these changes and not be subject to a long delay for a minor project review. So I don't know if this board feels anything differently on porches, but we could remove the items if you feel uncomfortable for staff to approve these. But I just wanted to point out it works both ways. You could take them out, and then sometimes the architects don't think our process is that very friendly if it's a minor alteration in their opinion. And I think we changed the size of the addition down to 150 square feet because that's what we noticed projects at a certain type. And we didn't want a guideline where it was allowing more square footage than, and I think originally it had proposed 250 square feet. So right now you could add, let's say, a small laundry room and still get it reviewed by staff if it's all matching the existing architecture, for example.
Mr. Chair?
Yep. Don?
Without getting specifically into what I don't agree with on item C of 10.3, the administrative review portion, I think that language needs work.
What's the title?
Chimney, with the chimneys.
Okay.
So without getting into specifics right now,
I'm going to highlight that area.
that might be left to the subcommittee,
Okay.
whoever that may be. And I'd be willing to be on that subcommittee, by the way.
Okay. I think, again, minor landscape alterations. We made some caveats as to, I think we're allowed to do an approval if it's no more than 3 trees, I think. And these are small trees. We would not consider large trees as something that we would. We have the, go ahead.
That was one section that I was going to comment on. The removal of 3 trees just kind of seems arbitrary to me. I mean, there might only be 3 trees on the lot, and they may be the significant ones. So it seems like the language could be tightened up in there. And this is S on page 13. And then removal of trees less than 12 inches in diameter. It seems to me that that's one section that could be looked at a little closer.
Okay. Moving on, we defined publicly visible. That was a definition that came out of discussions with the Single Family Design Board, where they felt certain additions, if you couldn't see them from the roadways and from a distant, then they could be considered more readily approval by staff. So we've included that definition. And then one of the things that we've added is a lot of discussion on zoning modification comments, how this board and other boards comment to the staff hearing officer and the planning commission with respect to modifications. And this is something that we've had training on, and we're just memorializing your role in that discussion. So I don't think there's anything controversial with respect to how you comment on that. That concludes the part 2. So I know we're running late. I'm wondering if we could skip the landscaping and maybe have the landscape architect participate in the review of that chapter again. We don't have much changes in that, so we can get to the last item, which is what I want to talk about, which is part 3, and then we'll finish up. We'll pass those out.
Thanks.
Okay. The primary motivation to change part part 3 is the changes having to do with preliminary approval. Again, we have had the public confused about what the appropriate. Do you have enough time? One more.
So, okay, what section are you
Throughout
reading?
the document in part 3, it talks about meeting procedures. You'll see that preliminary approval has been changed with respect to the levels of review, and anytime preliminary approval was mentioned in your document, it's been changed to project design approval. That is going to be the critical starting point for time approval timelines. So from now on, as the proposed ordinance amendments get adopted, your preliminary approval decision which is now going to be called project design approval, will be the clock of how much time a project has to get a building permit and to not be considered expired. Prior to this, we used to have a provision where you can get an extension at preliminary, and then you can get another multiple extensions at final. And what happens is it basically puts a lot of pressure on the applicant to know when those approvals expire and have there be a need to have an extension granted. We think that that just exhausts a lot of time. We just want to have one time frame, which is 3 years after project design approval you have to go get your building permit. And if you need an extension, it's going to be done through the community development director, where the community development director decides whether there's grounds to give a 2-year extension. So you'd have up to 5 years for a design review approval. That way this board, these decisions at project design approval don't come before you again, because that's caused some difficulties with applicants where there's a new board and the new board wants to make a different decision for reconsideration of their previous approvals. And we didn't think that was a very fair thing to the applicant, that you have an entitlement and you should be able to keep that without having to have it reopened again. So that's going to be a change. And the other thing that's changing, which I think is positive, is when a project has multiple approvals, that is, a project has an ABR approval and a planning commission approval or a modification, that the expiration of your application goes with the longest decision, which is land use driven. So if you have a mod that's good for 2-4 years, your design review approval goes with that approval. You don't have to worry about having 2 expiration dates. And that's been a problem with applicants where they think they get an extension for one and they don't get an extension for the other. And it causes confusion on when your expiration dates are triggered. So we're now going to rely on one expiration date. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that was well received by the ordinance committee. So we think it has a good chance of going forward, and we're hoping our boards also will be supportive of that change. And the other big change that we may have more language on, and I wanted to point that out, has to do with project reconsiderations. I think I actually had it crossed out. Let me just, yeah, there's portions that are crossed out. It has to do with appeals of ABR decisions and reconsiderations, I think. And I think there and there, reconsiderations. Let me explain to you why we're going to be changing that. Am I getting an email there? Okay. The reason we're changing the language there is because, again, if an application expires, the idea of having it be reconsidered because it expires is inconsistent, I think, with our normal practice of keeping entitlements alive. We've had applications where the ABR approval has expired, but they still have an active land use approval. It just doesn't make sense to have it come before you and have a discussion about whether their approvals are valid when they have a valid land use approval. So we're suggesting that language be revised, and our city attorney is looking at it with respect to how it's going to be revised. So this section will be, again, revised to deal with that issue. Also, the idea of when you can reconsider an item. We've had board members not notify staff in a timely manner. There are clear standard protocols that should happen if you want to reconsider your approvals. And that typically should happen by the end of your meeting. If you have a change of heart and you want to vote differently, you have the ability to open it up the item and say, I'd like to vote for a reconsideration of that item. It's a little unusual, but you have that ability. If you're on the prevailing side, that's the time to do it during that same meeting.
The applicant has left.
You can still do that. Okay, that's under current legal procedures. You also have the ability to ask that it be placed on the next agenda. That would probably be the more courteous thing if the applicant left, to say, I'd like to have this item reconsidered. Can you please place it on the next agenda? What we don't want is to have the next agenda published without notification, and you come to this hearing and say, oh, by the way, I would like to have that item reconsidered, and can you place it on the following agenda? That would be a month after. And so we want to tighten that up, and I think the city attorney is actually going to say you have like 48 hours after the meeting to decide, and that's it. If you don't tell staff, it's not going to be reconsidered on that basis that it wasn't timely. So it does put more emphasis on you to get it right. If you feel you're going to vote on something, and you know, we don't want the boards to change their minds on projects. Basically, it's sort of it's a bad thing for us to revisit something like that's been granted an approval. Unless, again, there is some misinformation or some misrepresentation that was given to the board, and then you can ask staff to look into that matter, and that might impact how you feel about the project. But it's got to be pretty much some specific grounds for that.
This has happened in the past, leading to problems?
We've had projects where they expired and they were put before the commission or board. I don't think this board, but other boards, and they denied the project because it was a different sentiment on the board, and they felt that it wasn't consistent with the current thought, yet the person had an entitlement and a land use approval. So it's a very awkward situation, and we don't want that happening again.
Okay.
So that concludes my presentation today. I think what might be appropriate now is who would like to work with staff. I heard Don want maybe volunteer.
I could work with Don. I don't mind working with Don.
You too?
Unless somebody else wants.
And Chris on the landscape?
And Chris on landscape.
Okay. And then I'll be meeting with all of you and coming back with a cleaned up version and showing exactly where we've made the changes.
Okay. And
we can submit something.
Yes, I would encourage you to, if you see something that you think is wrong, error, edit, you submit those red marks to me, and we'll get those incorporated. That
Okay.
concludes the discussion.
great. So did you also want to pass out that portion with the landscape to us, Jaime? Just so that we'd have it?
Yes, I will do that. And I also sent a version through the email, which was marked up so you can actually see. These are clean versions, so you can just read it and
Okay.
see if it makes sense.
Yep.
That there's a marked up version in the email that I sent you, so you can also refer to that.
Okay. Thanks.
There was some public comment received. And I think this is from Paula Westbury outlining some concerns about the guidelines.
By the guidelines?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that concludes the discussion item. And Jaime, I know that in this discussion item you mentioned the appeal that's happening tomorrow, but you didn't mention it up in the announcements or anything like that. You don't have anything additional that you needed to say there?
No, other than I think we have someone appointed to attend, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Ivan?
Yeah, and I'll probably be there too.
Okay, so as
Yeah.
long as you attend and participate.
Okay. So that for the appeal of the
I wanted to
9.
I wanted to announce that I will be at that appeal.
So we have 3.
For the, I will be there on the.
Okay, I think what's normal protocol is you could have 2 board members, one speaking on the prevailing side and one on the minority side. I think
And
that
I
would
would
be
be on the
appropriate.
minority side.
Okay, so you guys decide who's going to speak and represent the prevailing side. I think that would be.
Yeah, okay. We'll decide. Okay, so that brings us to the first item of the evening, 826 Delavina Street. This is a new item, concept review. And Gary, can you just turn these lights on first?
Can you hit that oval for your microphone?
Great, thanks.
Well, my name is Henry Lenny with Henry Lenny Design Studio. I have a project that I think is relevant to the previous discussion that you were having. It's one of those projects that happen to be in a neighborhood where there's all sorts of designs. Yet down the block, I think the significance of the neighborhood being Victorian is rather strong. In this particular case, if you recall, this used to be a flower shop for many, many years. And the flower shop is gone, but it was left with all sorts of interesting things, such as sliding glass doors right on the property line. And it's a bit of a, quite frankly, bad addition that would happen initially to an older building. The building in the back, and I don't know much of the history, might have been some sort of an auto shop or some sort of an industrial building. But one of the things that we want to do is just to make it look just slightly nicer for a couple of purposes, and one of them is to make it appealing for anyone that would want to lease the space. So under the scope of this presentation, all we're doing is we're thickening the walls, the perimeter walls that are visible from the street and not visible from the street, like in this case, and putting some new doors and windows. Eventually, sometime in the future, the likelihood is that both buildings would be torn down and something would be done in the future. So it's an interim sort of solution. I was really stumped because I really didn't know which direction to go in this case, and so what you're going to see as concept is taking a very neutral approach to this, where the design could straddle all of the different designs that happen to occur in that one block, and then utilizing some color. So as far as the parking lot is concerned, it's one of the nicest that I've seen, and there's no modifications to that parking lot at this point, or landscaping. But just getting right to the concept in this case is to take the existing walls, place a parapet all the way around to conceal the existing roofs. There's two types of roofs. This is a shed roof. This roof is a metal roof that would almost seem portable. We're still looking at the feasibility of completely removing that roof and replacing it. I don't know yet. But the idea is that we would have some new windows, a couple of new entry doors. We have no tenants for this yet. And then just clean up the exterior altogether. I thought that maybe the easiest thing to do is to bring it closer to the simplicity of the existing building by creating deep recesses, perhaps using some steel windows and doors. We were looking at that feasibility, and then just painting the building, and right at the entrances providing a metal canopy for the signage and the lighting. And in concept, that is really what the scope of the work is. And again, my thought that maybe I should bring this to you and get your opinion on it. I'm reluctant to put a lot of detail into this because no matter where we go, we probably are not going to go in the right direction unless we keep it as simple as I'm proposing, I suppose. As far as the colors are concerned, the idea would be to provide some colors that would be compatible both to the Spanish architecture but also to some of the Victorian buildings. And don't take these colors too seriously. I have learned that with colors you almost have to buy a gallon of paint, put on the wall, and see how it works. But this is the direction that we think we want to go, and also a darker wainscoting. As far as the light fixtures are concerned, we probably won't have many except that perhaps in the corners of the buildings, and not on the, and these are the Barcelona light fixtures that we would propose to do. Again, to try to make some small gesture towards compatibility to not sure what, but there in that corner, but to Santa Barbara Street in general. So all in all, this is really what the scope of the work is, and I welcome your comments and see which direction we should go from this point on.
Okay, I'd like to just open it up for. Do we have a public comment? No public comment slips. Just bring it back to staff.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do have one letter of concern from Ms. Paula Westbury.
Okay, thank you. And for the board for questions, and Keith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Henry, are there any proposals for the facade as it turns the corner at the property line, or?
Let me see, Keith, where you're looking at.
Right here. Right here.
Well, as far as the lower element, we definitely would carry on to what we're doing everywhere else. As far as the main building is concerned, or the large building, it would stay the same.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dawn? Questions?
No questions.
Paul?
No questions?
Gary?
No further. You didn't put that larger element on your drawing there. Is that correct?
I didn't put the...
That's the building.
That's in the
That's the
background.
building behind it.
Yeah.
Because there's some fenestration on it, right?
Well, if you
No,
look
there
at this
isn't.
photograph, yeah, it's rather simple. I suppose we
Okay.
could do something there, but...
Okay. No.
Clay, questions?
Just one question, Mr. Chair. Henry, you said that there wasn't going to be any work done to that back building, but are you doing windows and painting on the larger mass? Or not at all?
We weren't
We
planning.
don't know yet.
Well, we weren't planning. If you have any suggestions as far as the color of the main building, the one thing in the back of my mind, Clay, that I thought is that perhaps I should suggest to my clients to repaint the building so that it becomes more into a lighter color, perhaps, as this what we're doing at the bottom.
Okay.
And I'm sure that would work.
Chris?
Just noticing this. I assume, will you be removing these little low?
Probably not. I kind of like it.
Leave them there? Okay.
I don't know. Whatever you guys think.
Okay, that's my call. Yeah, little big things.
And I had a quick question. You said that you would have a wainscot of this color, but the elevation doesn't show.
You know, it didn't come out, and they should have
Yeah.
brought the originals.
And I guess my key question is that would you have a wainscot without having a different surface thickness? Are you just painting
Oh,
wainscot
yeah, just painting. We're running the property line,
on? Okay.
so we will not be projecting it.
Okay. All right. So that was my question. So I bring back to the board for comments. Keith?
I think overall the general direction is acceptable. There's the big office building across the street there on the other side of Canon Bernito that's kind of in this more Hispanic mode. And I definitely think whatever treatment should wrap that lower mass along the property line, as you indicated. To kind of follow up on Clay's point, I would like to see the bigger mass painted in a manner that ties in with ultimately with the final color scheme. I guess the only other suggestions would be some sort of additional kind of intermediate scale elements. I don't know if there's some other awnings at some of the windows or something besides just the smaller entry canopies. And then color-wise, I guess I'm a little shy of the red, so I'll see what my colleagues have to say with that. I could see that maybe as more the accent wainscot, but anyway, so that's it.
Okay, thanks. Dawn?
Yeah, I like it, Henry. I don't have any problem with it. I think it's an improvement. I think it's a little bit of a funky building. It always has kind of been, that little area. I was looking at the way you're treating the area between the sill of the window and the finished grade of the sidewalk, and it looks like that might be a recess from the property line, and you're treating it in a kind of a gray color, but that might be the area where you do the darker color. And if you introduced a wainscot that was in addition to that treatment down there, it might be too much. I don't know. I don't know. I think it may work depending on the colors you use, but you're already introducing that as a separate kind of element. It looks like it's recessed back, so I like that. So I trust that as you get farther into the colors and what you want to do, that is going to resolve itself with the design. But I think it's a really clean and simple way of handling this kind of odd, especially that odd cantilever at the street that's rather bulky looking in that one area. Am I seeing that right?
It is.
Yeah.
Here? Yeah. Which
So-
would just
which
be
would just
replaced by
disappear.
these, right?
Yeah.
Some little protrusions.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Paul?
I appreciate the comment that other people made. I agree with them. The one comment that wasn't made has to do about the roof drainage, and because right now that shed roof drains basically onto the sidewalk, and if you build a parapet 12 feet tall, you'll have to address that and how that gets dissipated. But the direction is going great.
Thanks, Paul. Gary?
Well, I concur with my colleagues here. I like the recesses and double wall thickness. I think that's, and the parapet roof is gonna add quite a bit to it. But I too am very concerned with the colors, and with the brightness of this color, I think it's going to bring attention to the building in general, where the back of the building really isn't anything going to happen to it. You know, it still has bars on the outside of it, which I think should be removed, and I think there's some things that should be included on that back building in order to upgrade it, to bring it up into this level of architecture. Because if we're going with something as bold as this red color, I think that we really should take a closer look at the building behind it, especially with the colors and like I say, the fenestration. And it does have that real almost deco garage or airport type looking things on the side of it, and I would just don't know if we want to bring that much attention to it with the colors.
Thanks, Gary. Great.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. My comments are similar. I think generally I like the way you're taking the project. I really like the less is more touch to it. You're keeping it simple. I agree with Gary that the back building, and some others, by the way, that the back building needs to be addressed, especially from the entrance to the parking lot side, where there's a lot of things happening in that general vicinity, and I'm not really sure how you're addressing that yet, but I don't think we should ignore it. And then my only other comment is the color. I think it looks beautiful on the paper, but I think we need to tone it down.
Chris? Thanks, Ray.
Nothing really much to add. I do agree with most of the comments here. The color could be toned down a bit, but overall I like the simplicity and the direction that it's taking. So nothing real additional.
Okay. I agree with the other comments. I do think that these colors need to be, they need to work together. So whatever you do with that and this one. The one thing that I think I feel that within this design is not going to work well is if you paint the wainscot on this red here, I think it's not going to work as well because I think you've done well there's such a big volume in the back here, and then you have this long slim thing, and then you've done a very wise design here where the elements that you put into this wall are fairly large. So the scale of this big block and this long starts to work together because you didn't make these two little things down here. You know, so you get this big scale and then the big windows. But I think once you start to paint that wainscot on there and it starts to divide up and fractures those big things, you're going to it starts to unravel a little bit. So I would really think twice about painting on the wainscot, and I do agree with the others on the sensitivity of the color. So, but otherwise, I think the board made very good comments, and I agree with them.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
If I may continue this for the next meeting, if it's possible.
Staff? Yeah. So that'll be a 2-week continuance back to full board. Okay. So we're open for a motion. 2-week continuance back to full board with some positive comments on design. I would take it. Anybody want to make a motion? I can't make one.
I'll take a stab. So this would be the 2-week continuance back to full board with the following comments. The board is supportive of the architectural direction for the facade improvements and looks forward to more complete presentation of the rest of the design with the following comments. Consider the red color carefully, and the board would look for alternatives to that concept. Study the relationship of the color of the lower street mass to the larger mass behind. The next drawing should address the improvements to the larger mass behind. And I think that's all I have at the moment.
Okay, do we have a second? Second by Clay. Under discussion. Any?
Just maybe that you could include, even though Henry gets it, just include the comment about studying the use of the wainscot, if it's...
Applicant to study the use of the wainscot on the street facade.
Okay, thanks. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Against, motion carries. Thanks very much. Great. Oh, there you go. Okay, so that brings us to the second item, 401.5 Old Coast Highway. These are extras, Henry?
Yeah, I'll take those.
Give us this one. We don't have one of these.
Oh,
thanks. Oh, photos in here.
Yeah, we can keep that.
We keep the photos, and then you could take this one again.
That you should keep, I think.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, we keep that one. Okay. Yeah. Okay. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Good
How are
to
you?
see you. Yeah.
I see you.
Got a little haircut?
Back from vacation.
Bill, do you have food?
Yes, we do. Right there. There's probably the more updated landscape plan on this one.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to, while you set up there, Henry, I'm going to just read the last minutes. Continued indefinitely to full board with comments. Carry forward the previous motions 4, 5, 6, 9 as follows. 4, study the pedestrian circulation and access to the units to minimize conflicts with parking and access through parking areas with an emphasis on accessibility to the trash and recycling. Study architectural treatment of the roofs and fenestration to unify the style and architectural expression of the elevations. Study the tree selections with regard to property lines. Define an entryway for each unit, particularly unit number 3, which does not have a defined entry. Provide an updated landscape to soften the hardscape and the facade of the building. Provide drawings that reflect fenestration changes. Provide a sense of entry and demonstrate quality materials. Provide a roof plan, sections, and a demolition plan. Okay, thanks.
Okay, name's Gil Garcia. We have the landscape architect here. Tell me your name.
Ricardo Castellano.
Carl? And Everett Woody, architect. First of all, looking at the responses here on study the pedestrian circulation, we can look at probably the landscape plan because it's added a couple of planters to the architectural plan on the circulation. We defined the circulation here in the path of travel to the doors, access, as you indicated, to the trash enclosure, access to this front door here. Where we had it full width here, I think there's been added some landscaping along there. And access to this unit 2 back here. And that, I think, minimizes the conflicts with the parking, and it does provide the adequate access through the parking area, which has always been a constraint. We have always been a constraint on this property is the parking area, but I think that this at least gets our pedestrian passage between the cars. Steady architectural treatment of roofs and fenestrations. We have looked at the fenestration and have simplified the fenestration on let's see, west elevation. There was some kind of strange looking existing windows up on top that we have removed, and I think this cleans it up, cleans that little strange looking little item up, and this is, we feel, much better elevation. The other windows and fenestration are going to be metal clad windows, and they'll be recessed where we put them in the new in here, recessed metal clad windows, and they'll be have a color which we will bring forth at a later date, and the entire buildings will be painted, and we'll bring a color scheme to that also, if that's now as far as the roofs go, we sincerely believe that leaving the flat roof the way it was originally designed is really the way to go on this, because it minimizes the sense of any building being back there by leaving it as it is. We feel also that from the back walls, as you can see in this back wall north elevation, it looks just like a wall. It doesn't look like a building. It looks like just a wall, and we think that is better than having to put roofs on it. We're leaving the existing, we'd like to leave the existing low-pitched roof in the existing structure, only in that any work, roof work proposed would be a modification, and since these existing structures is on the property line, we would have to have a lot of fire work done to it. At one point we're thinking of doing maybe this in a flat roof also with the parapets, but even that requires a modification. So we'd like to leave that and think that that is the best way to go in our opinion. Let's see what else we got here. Now the tree selection, and maybe Ricardo, you want to speak to the tree selection? We have heard the neighbors' concerns and have tried to respond to the tree selection.
As far as the trees, actually we haven't selected the trees, but we've come up with smaller accent trees along this side of the property where the neighbors are. With the new common area, we were able to add a little bit larger deciduous tree off of the property line area, more over towards the parking space. As Gil mentioned, this was about a 6-foot wide pathway, so we were able to add about approximately 3-foot wide planting strip in the center by the carport. The carport again has the vine growing over it, and then in the front here, where Unit 3 and Unit 1 are, we were able to put 2 more accent trees in the front on either side of the trash enclosure. And then if you look on the elevation, we were able to get vines growing up on the fence as well. And that's what you see when you drive in, is this view. Other than that, the rest relatively pretty much is the same as the last time.
Now, on this elevation, you could also see that we have defined a porch over the Unit 3 over the door, and also the porch that's already been proposed on Unit 2, taking some of the same elements of Unit 1 into these little porches, so there's felt that tied it together rather than the larger roof forms that we might have to do. So we feel that this is a good solution, recognizing the constraints of the footprint that the property gave us to work with, and the City Council's approval of that, those constraints. So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to public comment. We have one speaker slip here from David Munoz.
Thank you, Chair, board members. My name is David Munoz. I have the property at 401 Old Coast Highway. My wife brought up at one point some of the water runoff and that type of deal, but I'd like to bring up one other thing that just really comes to mind right now, and that is a safety factor for my building in the event of a fire. If we're going to be putting in any kind of planters along the driveway, which is now 12 feet wide, that limits access for emergency vehicles to come on back there along with that tree right in the corner. As you can see, this tree right here, I'm sure it's not to scale, and it doesn't represent that you're going to have about a 10-foot tree, it looks like there. The other thing is us being right adjacent to this property, we would have to contend with water runoff. We are going to have to put a planter, as called by building design here, about a 6-foot planter. So that is going to trap a lot more water runoff from their property. So I'm concerned as to how they would go about diverting any water off their property. So, and that's my big concerns for right now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And close public comment and bring it back to staff.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do have a letter of concern from Ms. Paula Westbury.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Michelle. Then I'll bring it back to the board for questions. Keith?
No questions.
Dawn?
No questions.
Gary?
Did you include roof plan with the...
No, we did not.
Did you do it?
This is the pitch roof, the flat roof, and the low pitch roof, and the elevations existing.
Clay?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Are you still planning to do skylights on the rear unit?
Yes.
Okay. And then, are the buildings now not connected? There used to be a little roof connection between the little tiny garage building and the other building. There used to be a little roof connecting those two. Now it's not on there?
That was fairly early drawings. That's been taken off. That was intended to be added, but it was not.
It's not there anymore.
Not there anymore.
And your modification for the building's proximity, it satisfies that requirement?
We got that modification.
That's all my questions.
Okay. Thanks. Chris?
Just one quick question about this the pathway that goes straight back. There's stepping stones at the back. Do those lead somewhere?
It's a service meter boxes, I believe.
I see. Okay. Oh, that's it for questions.
The material was planned to be that absorption, interlocking brick.
Yeah, the
colored
pavers.
Pavers, yeah.
Okay. Okay, and my questions are, we have, it's 5 cars, right? 1, 2, 3?
6.
6.
One covered. Carport.
So 1,
Uncovered.
2, 3, 4, 5. Where's the 6th? In here?
Right there.
So he goes, the front of his car is in over this portion here? You see how this parking spot narrows down?
I think that what that is that's not on the ground, by the way. That's probably the vine pocket, right? So it signifies the vines kind of rising up over there.
Yeah, so it's a little over.
So it's overhead. Yeah.
Okay. All right. No, I'm just looking at this. This is not parallel to this, right?
No.
So what you have is a car that drives in here, and then another one that overlaps that parking spot. So this parking spot overlaps that one.
No.
No.
How do architectural site plan
Okay.
shows that.
So let's see here. We have a line here, and we have a line here. So that's how it works, like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, and your skylight is somewhere in here?
Yeah, they're shown on the floor plan.
Yeah, and can you show me what the design of that skylight looks like?
It's going to be just well, I can't show. I can bring it in, but it's going to be a flat.
It's flat. It's not a dome, right?
No,
it's not a dome.
Flat.
So do you have that noted anywhere on these drawings that it's a flat skylight?
No, not at this time, but we can certainly note it. It's just on the floor plan.
I think that I didn't print them, but they should have been there. My apologies for that.
There was 4 skylights, one here, and one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and they should be noted on there, but they don't get on there.
All right.
Mr.
Well,
Chair, could I squeak in a question after you?
Sorry?
Can I squeak in a question after you?
Okay. Yeah, so we would need to have that documented, where we,
Yes.
and that it's noted to be, okay, flat. Question, Gary, go ahead.
The only question, you mentioned that the roof is an existing roof, but isn't this roof in fact getting torn off, and doesn't it
There
have
was
a
a
different
roof.
type pitch with a cricket and?
There's a roof that's on it now that is under enforcement to be removed.
Okay, so this in fact is not an existing roof.
No.
This roof will be taken
We're
out.
taking it back to the existing roof. That's what I meant. We're taking it back to the existing roof. That the other roof that was one, did
So
not
an
get a
existing
permit.
roof underneath it, or will
Yes.
you be building a new
No,
roof?
an existing roof underneath it. Just exactly the same framing as underneath it, because this was built without a permit over the top
Okay.
and being removed.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to,
Now,
thanks, Gil. Bring it back to you for comments. Keith?
I guess my only comment would be on the south elevation of Unit 3 to consider having a flat parapet, leave the pitched roof behind, but at least from the view up the driveway, you'd have a flat roof appearance that's similar to the other flat roof portion of the project. And then the only other comment would be to show the skylights on the north elevation roof. That's it.
And with right here, right? You think can flatten that out so it looks like a parapet like these here, right? Okay, thanks. Don?
Yeah, I think finally I'm starting to become okay with this project, which is a good thing. But right here, I think it might be, this is a little thing, but I think it might be hard to get, there's a tree pocket right there. So if you're coming from the other unit trying to get to the trash and recycling, if there's a tree pocket right there, you won't be able to get your trash around the corner because a car would be parked there. So that may not be the best place for that tree.
The tree pocket is actually in the corner. Yeah.
There.
Oh.
Where the poche is a little different right here.
Oh, okay. So for some reason the walkway ends. So you just might want to continue that around.
Okay.
And then the only other thing was that I maybe think that tree that got brought up earlier that was down the driveway, this one, you might have to look at what kind of tree that is because it is awfully close to that existing foundation of the neighboring parcel. Or eliminate it. I would be okay with eliminating that tree altogether.
Okay. Thanks, Don. Gary?
I'm still having issues with the rear roof. I thought we were under the direction that we were going to have a cohesive architectural style. And to me, it still looks like there's an addition to the back of the building, which was the commercial addition. So I don't see this as the front facade of the building and all of that looks fine to me, but when you're looking at the building from the rear, the flat roof is actually taller than where the gable ends, and I still don't think that the roof styles are compatible, and how they interconnect to each other is not really something that I think is well designed. So I would look to see that the roof styles be a little bit more compatible, as I suggested as we suggested in the last meeting.
Okay, Gary. Clay?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. My comments about the project thus far are similar to what Keith had said and what Gary had said. And I'm going to focus on one other element that I think is important. On the east elevation, we've got 4 windows in there. I can't tell if they're operable or not operable, but stylistically, aesthetically, they look a little out of place. And I think when I look at the building in general, there isn't a cohesive window package, which actually could be something that ties the building and the architectural style together. So I'm saying this as a negative, but I think if you went and looked at the proportions and the design of those windows that you're adding or changing, you could probably find the right proportions that would start to make this building less disconnected. So in terms of style, and that's a big area, and I see it especially on the east elevation. Excuse me. I agree with the parapet comment, flat roof parapet comment on the little garage or old garage building. On the north elevation, you're missing a window in the breezeway, or the light well. And then the other piece is I think that we need to show at least that these windows are operable so you can get some ventilation in the building. I can't tell from the drawings.
Thanks, Clay. Chris?
I actually have the same two comments that Don had from earlier, and that was one that the tree at the corner here, depending on what the species is, should be either moved away from it or consider a different tree, but definitely a root barrier of some sort there. And then the same with the connection of the walkways in the trash area. And then the two trees that flank that trash area seems that it depends again on what they are, but they're very close to it, so I'd be worried about root encroaching in there. So just something to consider when you actually do choose the species themselves. But that's about it. I think the landscape has come a long way since the last time.
Okay, thanks. And just before I make my comment, I had a quick question. What's this here?
It's a window, side window, and down with a door. It's a door and a window.
Okay.
Side light.
All right. So first off, I think that for me, my comment, I agree that this should have a parapet that mimics this one here. So at least what you've done is you've isolated this gable end and you've flanked it on each side by the flat areas.
Mr. Chair, can I comment on that? Because I believe that would be restricted in the interior yard setback. You have a non-conforming structure, so we don't let the walls increase in height. So if depending on what type of height you need there, we might be able to support something of modest height, but
it looks like that it may be
there's less than a foot
and
of
a
difference.
half, or foot and a half at the end and a foot here at the apex, maybe.
checking with our zoning enforcement, we would need a zoning modification. So there might be a support because it's a fire code and a aesthetic enhancement if the support feels it's appropriate. Again, but it's sending this applicant through another modification process. Just to let you know, we were trying to avoid that.
Unless we could do this might look kind of strange, but at least it would be an attempt. Do it up to this point and just put it back to the setback. Something we can do. As soon as you go into the setback, we've got another modification. And
I see what you're saying.
That's a problem. That's why I thought it'd be simpler to leave it. But
although maybe if it came up, it might just look like a shed.
It might.
Coming off the side.
It might look all right if you could do it up to that level.
Well, we can certainly try that and bring it back and see what you think of it. If not, then I would have to get a strong recommendation from you that you would support a modification.
Well, I think you should give it a try. What you just suggested.
I've drawn it.
I think it's better than leaving it like that. I mean, making it cohesive. We already have an issue with the roof's not. You know, if we can just simplify the whole project and just have these two flanking flat items, that might be better. I agree with Clay on all of these windows. You know, we have all these different size windows, and none of them. Maybe some of these are sliding, but they're not shown. Can you comment on that as to are they operable? Are they?
We will come back with the these are all operable windows. They were going to be casement windows, and maybe we could come in with a little something
better proportions or something.
So I agree with that comment, and I would work with that.
Yeah, and then the same comment I think would make from here. If you have the vision light here, and this goes all the way to the ground, and then this one the door doesn't. You know, it's like maybe this should end here, and maybe that should end there, and you know, and then this should tie in with everything. So the whole window situation could work a little better. We would like to see the skylights and what the design is. See what that looks like. So you're going to do window proportions and ventilation, south elevation, flat parapet. I see you just say that it's proposed windows. You just determine, you said metal windows right now?
Metal clad windows, we'll call them out as metal clad windows, Sierra, Pacific.
And you'd come back with a detail, and then you'll be coming back with colors and stuff like that. I wondered if you had, just before I go, I know it's a comment again, do you have any comment on the public's comment on drainage going back to the other property, the neighbor's property over here?
I believe all I can say to that is that it's going to be part of the construction documents, and the building department's going to require that we have that we show the drainage, and our intent would be that the drainage would come down here, whether we have to put some catch basin or something here and cut it and bring it down through there. That would be our intent. We would work with the plumber.
So that's your intent. That's okay. That's your intent.
May I comment on that just a moment?
Just shortly, because we pass.
Existing, all these areas now are paved areas, so he's going to have a lot less runoff with landscaped areas. So we're going to be absorbing a lot more water than we would if these were all to remain paved areas. So that's the only comment I'd like to make.
But it is a building department requirement that we saw, and we will work on it once we get the ABR approval.
All right. Now, just trying to put all the comments together I heard from all of the boards. I think
I'm ready to make a motion if you'd like.
Okay, well, I'm ready to have a motion. Just seeing, I think that Gary is the only one that has some stronger thoughts on the roofing. Did you?
If I'm the only one that has a stronger thoughts on the roofing, yeah, I don't feel that it's that compatible. I think that I do believe that the roof height makes it incompatible with the existing building, but I still believe that it looks like an addition and not something that is cohesive with this style of architecture.
I don't disagree with you.
Well, I thought our goal was to make something that was comprehensive.
Yeah,
and if that was our goal, we haven't hit that mark.
Yeah.
That's my comment.
I don't disagree with you. I think that the solution is.
I just thought you might want to know this, that we did look at the archive sets, and when that use was established, the ABR did approve the flat roof. Just different ABR, but at that point they did approve.
Okay, Dawn. Thanks, Jaime.
I'd like to make a motion for a 2-week continuance with the following comments: to connect the walkway to the trash enclosure. The second comment is to show the types, sizes, and operability of all fenestrations. 3 is specify appropriate trees and root barriers where required. And 4, show locations and types of all proposed skylights. And I'll tell you why in case it matters to anybody, I'll tell you why my motion does not include changing the roofs. I think that if you look at, in particular, the elevation that shows what these units are going to look like from the street and as you approach the property with regards to the gates, the privacy gates that are being added, the landscape, the carports, the little awnings over the doors, in addition to the trees and all the landscape areas, I think that to get wrapped up in whether or not there should be a 12-inch parapet over a slightly pitched roof is, especially if it requires an additional mod, I think this project, in my opinion, is close enough to providing a fairly decent standard of aesthetics for these units that wasn't there before. That's why I'm not making that comment in my motion. I don't know where it's going to go.
You're talking about the parapet over this portion here?
Yeah. I don't think that when you approach these units and you're looking at it, you're not going to be looking at that roof and saying, wow, that roof really doesn't fit in. There's flat roofs, there's pitched roofs. It's a combination of different roofs, and I don't think it's going to be something that is necessarily missed.
Okay, do we have a second? Second by Chris. Under discussion, anyone? No discussion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have 3, 4, 3 against. 3, 4, 3 against. So we have 3 all. So we need a tiebreaker. So that motion fails then, right?
Yeah.
Does someone want to make another motion with a slight amendment in there? In other words, what in Dawn's motion you would like to change, and then make that change in the motion and see if that can be supported by the others? Anybody?
Mr. Chair, I'll take a stab at it.
Thank you, Keith.
I would have the same motion with the addition of adding the parapet over the south elevation of Unit 3.
Okay, do I have a second for that?
Prior to that, was there any mention of the windows?
Yes, they did have mention of the windows. The one thing that Dawn didn't mention with the windows, but I think she meant it, but she didn't mention the wording, was proportionality of the windows, the cohesion.
I think I said size, but...
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So are you seconding the? Oh. Sure. So we have a second, and under discussion on that one, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So 2 opposed and 4 passed. So motion carries. So Keith's motion carries.
Thank you. Can you, just as a comment, as a motion, I guess it's a comment to, might have to go back to get a modification back to City Council, that I think City Council would understand if you recommended.
For a mod.
Well, they did take action on the zoning modification, so I think there's some question about it may have to go back for their re-review. We'll look into that.
Yeah.
I tried.
I will let you. We're just going to leave it like. There's a few things here that are in this project that are left for others to solve. So.
We'll be back then with the rest of the items, and then in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to item 3, 1820 Delavina. So Keith, you had note? You had note? Okay.
Must be my dog. Makes me feel happy.
Okay, while they set up, I'm going to read the motion. We have quite a few items here. Continued indefinitely to Planning Commission to return to full board with comments. The compatible analysis is, let's see, generally okay. So then, item 2, the board appreciates the reduction in mass, bulk, and scale of the proposed project. 3, study the treatment to the bay windows on the north and south elevations to add additional relief to the roof line. 4, consider revising the north elevation gable to be consistent with the other gable treatments in the project. 5, study a different architectural expression of the second floor conservatory on the rear east elevation to be more porch-like. And 6, study the feasibility of adding an additional street tree. Okay, you can proceed.
My name is Jay Blatter from Hawkhauser Blatter Architecture and Planning. And actually, what I'm back here for today is only one item. In other words, we're still going through. We have not yet been to Planning Commission. We're still receiving comments. So what was noticed today was as part of the environmental review, they requested that we add some acoustic glass in the front because under the findings, any porches in De La Vina Street need to have up to 5 feet of height glass. So we're really only here presenting that addition. Everything else we plan on, coming back when we're through Planning Commission, and we had pretty positive comments the last time. So I'm here just to present. Kelly, my planner, asked us just to come back just for this one item for the glass today.
Yeah. So are you saying that every porch on De La Vina Street now is going to have to have
If you have
a
a
glass?
porch, the acoustic report is because of the noise on De La Vina Street. If you're facing De La Vina Street, you would have to have a
glass
up to
railing?
5 feet. Yeah.
If you have
Wow.
open yard in the front
Right.
yard.
Right.
Wow.
So
What a rule. Wow, that's going to make
So-
De La Vina Street just look wonderful.
well, it was a noise study requirement, right? It was a noise study requirement, and basically we've got like a 16-inch high wall there, which we kept sort of low to try to minimize the height of the wall, and then we've got 3.5 feet of glass, and basically in researching, it seems like we have two options. One option is where it's like a frameless glass, so there's very little frame, almost no frame, and the other option is, where there's some, no vertical frame, and we could even I could bury this frame below the wall so you don't see it, but that's sort of that's the cards we're being dealt with. We certainly don't want to forego nice relationships on De La Vina Street for, the residents. So I'm here to get comment from the board on.
Okay. So,
This is sort of imposed on us. It's not something we're including.
Mr. Chair, can I
Yes.
ask you a question?
yes, Keith, Clay. Go right ahead.
I think it's pertinent to this proposal. Refresh my memory on the requirement. You need to have a noise barrier, correct? It doesn't
Right.
have to be glass.
Well, it could be a solid. I mean, you could make a solid wall.
Just
I
making
just
sure
think
that-
it just seems. I'm basing on the previous design discussions we had, and also, the concept of sort of having some transparency, and to me, a natural porch. I think residents like looking at the activity on the street. A 5-foot wall, a solid wall would suffice. If I didn't think that would be the direction the board would look to go, but I'm open for any.
And where you're showing it is just on the southeast,
Just on the,
southwest
I could show
corner?
you on the plan, it turns a little bit,
Yeah, let's see on the plan.
I think the best
Nothing
if,
around the oak tree?
no, basically,
Isn't
if
that
you look at,
open yard?
I made a dark line so you can just see where it is. They just want it over there. In other words, here,
Yeah,
here,
why?
here, and
But
here.
why here and not over here?
Yeah.
That's
Is
just,
that part of your, are both of them?
because this is
open
under the
yard?
porch, so it's not part of the open space, probably because it's not required. It's not open to the sky, so it's not required here. Kelly, our planner, would be able to answer those questions. But I believe this is where we were directed that we needed to have it as a result of the dark, review and the
But that
environmental
dimension
review.
from the screen to the building is
10 feet.
10?
Right. We dealt with this on some other projects too, on State Street.
Are we on public comment and so we can start making comments?
I hijacked us. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. So let's. Okay. So I'm. Okay.
Yes.
We're gonna.
Yes,
You finished?
that's what I'm here.
Okay, I'll bring
Yeah, I don't-
so open it up for public comments. See no public comments. Good. I'll bring it back to staff. I think we have a letter of concern from Paula Westbury. Thank you very much, and then we bring it back to the board for questions. Paul?
I have one quick question. It looks like you have a trellis over that area with like maybe 8x8 posts or something.
Mhm, Yeah, there's an open trellis above it, yeah.
And it looks like in plan that the trellis post and the glass are not in the same line. Is there a way that you could move the posts out
Yes.
in the same line as the glass wall?
Well, here's the reason those were held backwards, because we didn't, I have to check if we can encroach on that front yard setback just with some of the trellises. I held it back so the trellis members could come right up to the 10-foot line, but I think we are allowed some minor encroachment with just the trellis elements, so that the post became the support for the glass, basically, and integrate it. I would either do that, or I could bring the glass in
I can move the glass back behind the wall too. Either
To the
way.
same plane
Yes.
as the posts. Okay.
And I think that may be a better. That's not a bad suggestion, you know, because at least it sort of integrates it more with some other structure.
You might be able to have the actual trellis cantilever 2 feet into the setback and just have the posts on the setback line.
I could also, I mean, and once again, I'm looking for some direction here because I'm, you know, to me this is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I could raise the stone wall up higher to
Okay.
minimize the glass too.
Okay, let's just continue with the questions. Paul, you have any other questions? No. Okay, Dawn?
Is there any way, Jay, that there could be a reconsideration of the noise study? Because what's happening here is a comment that's being made by a noise study that's supposed to make the livability of this area better is making it look like a prison. And it's making it awful, in my opinion. And it's completely destroying it. So it's, I think that's a problem. So that's why I'm asking that
I
question.
don't think so. I mean, I think the noise study is basically, I don't think they'll, I don't know, Kelly, I don't think they're going to change their noise study because of livability issues. They don't care.
Is there another place you could get the open yard, like back behind here, back behind in the back of the property?
Or the upstairs area.
Or the upstairs area, so that that area doesn't have to be considered an area that has to be quiet. It's not going to be quiet.
Yeah.
It's just not.
Is the second story area where you screen that conservatory, could that be considered outdoor living space?
Well, let me see. So I want to just check can I ask Kelly a question? In other words, if we were to find that equal area somewhere else, and that's not part of the required outdoor open space, then we would not have to put the glass there, or we still need the glass there due to its proximity to the street?
No, you won't. You shouldn't have to.
I'd have to check to see. There has been some dispute between our environmental analysts that whether or not, if it's not required open space, if you still have to shield it from noise.
Okay. Because it would make sense if it's not required, if it's not required open space, because then other people would just have to be putting this fence up all around their properties, you know.
And I'm telling you why I'm
I
asking
had
that
a project
question.
in HLC, they made me do it where it wasn't required.
Well, I
space.
had one where they didn't. I had one where we had to enclose an area, and we didn't want to do it on the front of the building, so we enclosed the area on the back of the building to provide the required area that was quiet. And then we didn't have to do it on the rest that was going to be affected by the street.
Okay, let's go along with questions then. Gary?
The only question I have is, do you have a second floor plan with that?
You know, I didn't even bring the second floor plan with me unless I don't think I have it with me because I was mainly just.
So what is that area? Did you include that area earlier as a?
Yeah, I think we did. I mean, I could look. I look into it, but I don't think, you know, with the site being so constrained, I don't know if I could find this much, you know, area, you know, to replace somewhere else. I'd have to really look. Although I think we already are including this. This is an actual outdoor spot in the side yard we're using. I'd have to think about that, how I might be able to do that. It's
Okay. Clay, question? Chris?
I guess I have the same question. But one thing is the open space that you have designated in the front, does that include this area with the oak tree at all, or is it just the terrace that you're speaking to?
No, I think we're not allowed to count anything here towards the open space. Doesn't count towards the required minimum open space.
Okay. That's it. Thanks.
Not that strange. Okay, bring it back for comments. Paul, no comment? Dawn?
I don't like the glass, and I don't want to support the glass. So that's why I'm asking for another solution to relocate the quiet area somewhere else.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, Don? What about I mean, they said we could put we could put landscaping up to 5 feet. It's just like, in other words, we'd like to have the visibility to see the street. If we had a living private, I could do that. But we're sort of between a rock and a hard place. We're anxious to get to Planning Commission, and
I know, it would be
I
hard for
hesitate
me to
get thrown
support.
between
So in answer to your question, it would be hard for me to support either the glass or a full privacy wall. But I don't like the glass.
Okay. And thanks, Dawn. That's good. Gary?
Yeah, I'm opposed to the glazing. I may be persuaded to have a stone sand wall or something to that nature. I'm not really happy about that either, but I would prefer a solid massing of stone before the glare of that glass.
Okay, thanks.
So,
Clay?
Mr. Chair, I don't know that a hedge or a stone wall would really do it for me. I think it just needs to go away. And if it was up to me and we needed a modification for open yard, I would definitely support it.
Thanks, Clay.
In order to keep the aesthetic of the front of this building.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if we say, oh, stone would be okay, I don't think it would be. I think it'd be very massive on that side. So I'm going to agree with Clay.
Yeah. And my comments are very much the same. I think what's happened is even if you were to have the glass and not a big stone wall, and that trellis were to stay there, and then the plants were to go down, essentially what you have is this in a fairly enclosed area in the front, and I think it just adds mass, bulk, and scale coming out towards the front. And so I just feel that it's unfortunate, and the combination of these things are not working together. So
well, it's not something I included in the original design, but we're sort of.
I think they'll have to find a more, try to find a better solution than to solve it this way, because it's adding a vertical element there, and then it's another one coming down from the top. Whether it's glass, whether it's stone, it's going to end up being just more mass, bulk, and scale, and it's just not going to.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know how the rest of the board feels about this, but we were talking earlier about the fact that you had these trellis posts already really close to that edge, and the only thing that I think, and I'm going to bring it up as, I'm not sure exactly how I feel about it, but it does add to the mass, bulk, and scale. But if you had to, if there was no option for relocating the open yard, then I might not be opposed to a trellis that was enclosed, like an enclosed porch, a traditional enclosed porch, not an enclosed trellis, but something that looked like a real well-built enclosed porch that had a flat roof with windows in it or something. But then you're defeating the purpose of sitting outside.
Yeah.
So the reason that we all liked it was because you could sit outside and watch the world go by, and that is kind of how the neighborhood is.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, I was hoping if we went with the frameless glass and we kept it back and you have the wall in front of it, with no frame, it's pretty transparent. I don't think it's big and bulky and massive or cause a lot of attention. And, I could raise this wall up a little to like a 36-inch height, then you're ending up with 2 feet of, clear glass that's behind it. I think with landscaping in front of it, I don't think it's going to be all that bulky. It's not my choice just because I like traditional openness. But we may be between a rock and a hard place here, based on the constraints of the site. And we'd hate to have to go for a mod for this, because I think that somewhat prejudices you when you go in front of Planning Commission. This would be a mod more based on trying to make it better, not necessarily because the project can't fit within the confines of the site. It's a little.
All right. I think what we have here is that in this present proposal, this is not going to work. And I think that what you're saying is that maybe where it's all clear, I think having a contemporary style all glass in front of a building like this is not a solution for Santa Barbara, where no matter what the style of the building is, if the sound control comes in that you have to have one, everybody puts a clean sheet of glass with no kind of detailing or anything like that. I think that would be a mistake to go down the line. So I think it's possible that you may be able to find some point where you can design this in a better way. I think the big thing for me is that if you have this overhanging element that comes out so far, I'm going to always say that this is too much mass, bulk, and scale. If you start to come up here and this starts to come down, I could see that trellis going back to the building a little bit, even if you had columns out here, and but that the major part of that overhanging covered area would have to go back to make this thing breathe. to make it look like just a screen and not a wall. And that's for me. The others may have different opinions, and they already gave them, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. I think you really have to look at two options, go back to see what your other options are, and if you don't have other options, then you have to come back with a different proposal of using the glass, but in a different proposal on this clear sheet glass all the way along.
Is it unanimous amongst the board that if I do come back with a revised proposal, you'd rather see it integrated with the vertical structure as opposed to independent? Because there's a million ways I could come back here. And I mean,
let's see, Paul, what you think? Like nothing at all, or what? Or you would see some?
I would rather see it, if it has to be there, incorporated with the architecture, right? With the wood.
John, incorporated with the architecture, or none at all?
Not at all.
Okay, none at all is the first. I mean, none at all is the first for all of us.
Yeah.
We definitely, it's going to be hard.
That was my first choice, too. This was imposed on my client and myself. Yeah,
it's just going to be hard for us, so it's...
It has to be not at all. The building's already...
I don't even want to present an option. I mean, at this point, because...
Okay.
The building, we had a tough time with the building as it was.
Okay.
For its size, bulk, and scale. And to be
Adding on to the size, bulk, and scale with a conservatory or a big wall or anything in the front of it is really adding a lot to the mass.
So essentially what you're hearing is that none at all is acceptable, and if you find yourself in a difficult place, it's going to be very hard to make it look good. But we're not closing that option to you, but it's going to be very hard for the board to find a comfortable place with that.
So Kelly, if we can't put glass there, then we have to replace that equal area somewhere else, or go for a mod, but that's a mod based on a technicality of the acoustic report. I mean, obviously we're still going to use that space and have people out there. Would the board say you can't have people out there then, or?
Well, it's also required. I mean, we're going to write an initial study on this project too, so it's also part of the CEQA requirements to meet the noise thresholds. So the noise study says in order to put your outdoor space there, you have to shield it from the noise. So
only required space, if we can replace that.
I'm going to double check on that because I've gotten varying answers.
Okay.
Because if
we'll let you guys
I just want to point out one question to the board. If it's not related just to required space, then your question to the board is true. Any porch on De La Vina Street, required or not, in the future, based on this acoustic report's going to hit with the same thing, and it's something. We'll have no porches, I guess, on De La Vina, just blank walls, which I think would be a real loss architecturally. But
or if you drive down it, everybody have like glass panels, which would be terrible. And I would hope that would never come to pass.
All right.
But, okay, so we're open to a motion.
I'll make a motion for a 2-week continuance for what? Could I word this?
We ask them to return to the board with a solution that does not involve a glass screen, or to resolve the necessity for the glass sound wall with staff.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
And a solution that does not mass bulk and scale. Anyway, that's your you make your motion. You make your motion. Sorry.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I was at a loss.
So just clarify there for Gloria. The motion is.
Provide a solution. Glass screen or a solution.
Or work with staff in which a solution is that glass is not required.
I think not just glass, but any screen is what we're talking about.
With a solution that does not require a sound wall at the front of the building.
Yes, thank you.
That's great. Do I have a second?
I did.
Good. Okay, we have first and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Against, motion passes. Unanimously. Sorry, Jay. That's a toughie.
You're in position on me.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings us to number 4, 814 Orange Avenue.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, while you set up, I'll read this. It's okay. This is a final review Justin, return with preliminary landscape plan, including a preliminary plant selection and layout. The suggestions for the metal awning on south elevations are acceptable. Return with a proposed alternate entry on the south side. No, that's not it.
Yes.
That is it? Yeah, return with a proposed alternate entry on the south side of 816 Orange Avenue. Study pedestrian circulation with regard to planting opportunities in the proposed landscape plan. Okay.
Those are all the ones I saw online.
Okay. They just remind me of the previous one, but maybe it was just slightly different. I thought we had gone pretty far.
For the record, my name is Justin Van Mullum. I'm with On Design Architects.
Right.
I spoke with the owner, and before we went too far down the path of creating a landscape plan and changing up some of the pavers, he heard your comments, and we're just here to hammer out the issue with the entrance in the back, because we didn't want things to change too much if we go into working drawings.
Okay.
The solution that we found, since it is a south side and it is in the back, we've got the south side on the street. We've created a color for the door that is the door off of the kind of goes down the side there.
To the side.
We've kind of incorporated the same color for the awning at the top. And then on that south elevation, you can see that there's a covered area. And so as you see it walking up, the second unit in the back, we have a spot for signage, and then we have a covered area kind of inviting you in to that dining room, kind of kitchen flex space, which is right here. And at the street, we still have so that's the entrance that you see off of the street, and right at the sidewalk you've got another little area that's been cut into the small raised wall that's existing, similar to the one that's already there. So now we have the option of coming from this location where we have a sign. We've been able to get a number for the unit, so it has its own individual number. It's not A or B. And then you walk down the path, and you can walk onto the patio where you've got that entry element that's a covered area, and then you've got the signage as we've got it shown in the elevations. So before we go into working drawings, we just wanted to kind of tie that down.
Okay, so it. No, you're just dealing with number 3 then.
Yeah, we're not asking for final. We just wanted to refine that one issue before we start details and working drawings.
Okay. So I just bring it back for public comment. Seeing no one, I'll close that. Bring back to staff.
We're just trying to, because this is apartments, basically trying to keep the cost to a minimum and trying to keep the same floor plans best of our ability.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do have one letter of opposition from Ms. Paula Westbury.
Thanks very much. Questions, Paul?
No.
Dawn?
I had one. Justin, why could you not bring the entrance through the private outdoor living space and keep the same floor plan, which is what you're saying you want to do? Go back to the floor plan on the camera and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Why couldn't you still bring people through this way instead of all the way around, and then you're actually entering right in the kitchen? You're bringing all the guests through the kitchen at the back of the property. Why couldn't you just do this?
And that was kind of I thought it was a valid point, and that's what we want to do with our paving. We just haven't gotten there with the landscape plan yet, but we would bring people down this 7-foot path and then right into this area, and that's why we've created a covered area with signage, kind of showing them that is the front door, basically. And that's
where is that covered area with the signage? It's up here, right?
No, it's right here.
Oh, I thought that was up here. Okay.
Up here we have just a...
So why do the stepping stones still lead everybody around to the back of the building?
The stepping stones, if you look over here, and once again, we haven't gotten into the landscaping yet, and I did hear the the request to restudy the stepping stones, but we have the existing patio. This is a concrete patio or some type of concrete pavers that you would step onto, and you'd basically enter off of this door right here. And that would be...
So it's not, this is not a gated outdoor private
It
area.
is. It is. It's
So where's
gated.
the gate?
The gate, this is a fence right here. And this is kind of hard to see if I move this one over. So the way that we split the yards up is
So there's a fence
this,
right there.
yeah, this,
But what's here?
this is just a patio, and this is just planting space.
So this is going to be kind of the front door?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and this will be the door that they use to get to their
I get it.
parking.
Thank you.
Okay. Gary?
The type of doors, are they going to be sliding glass doors?
Probably not if we end up going with that as the front door, since it's going to be used too much.
Okay.
Okay. Chris?
I think Clay brought this up last time. I'm just wondering why all the stepping stones are pushed to one side in these spaces, up against the house on one side.
And I did hear Clay's comment last time. I just haven't had a chance to respond to it. We're going to work on a landscape plan as soon as we nail down the architecture.
Okay.
And I'm not here for anything but just revisiting. I already received preliminary and just want to...
Right. And what was the comment that you're trying to get approval on today?
Return with a proposed alternate entry on the south side of 816 Orange Avenue.
Okay.
In other words, a proposed alternate to coming all the way around to the back. What seems to be the back door in a sense.
Okay.
So that elevation, this elevation right here.
Yeah, so that would be their front door now.
For the back
Or they
unit.
design it in such a way that it could be used as a front door also.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, so comments? No comments? No comments. Dawn?
Just that I like not having to go all the way back around, which was our comment last time, and I don't think this works. I think that you might even want to consider doing an entrance here with an awning off the side so that you can keep that, but it doesn't look like a front door, and then when you get to this point and you see both doors, you know that that's the entrance because there's an awning over it, similar to there's an awning somewhere else, I think, or keep that awning or put another one over there. A single door is going to be your front door, and people are going to look for a single door. So that's my only comment.
Yeah. And there is a window there right now?
Yeah, it would have
So-
to be, it's higher, it would have
Yeah.
to be kind of relocated.
Oh, I see, yeah. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question? Is that the dining room?
Yeah, well, it's not a formal dining room because this plan just doesn't afford the space.
Right.
It's,
Okay.
it's the eating area.
Right, it's the foyer.
Yeah. Gary?
Much like my house.
I think that the proposal will work, but I would prefer that the sliding glass door not be used and it be changed to an entry door. And he could still use that area as an entry. It's a very small place, and to add two doors 90 degrees to each other, I think, is kind of an unfortunate layout. So I think that maybe he should just restudy this door and make it more entry-like rather than a patio door.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe this
Window
could,
and a door.
maybe this could be wider, and then like you have 3 panels and one's operable and the other 2 do whatever. Anyway, I'll leave that to you. Clay.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll just chime in on the door. I kind of like Don's comment because if you are visiting and have never been here, you're coming down the pathway next to a building, you're walking down along an 8-foot, 7-foot area, and having a small little canopy with a light out front of it might actually signify where the door is. I think that's the biggest problem on that particular project and this issue. So, I mean, I could entertain it either way. I agree with Gary's comment about take out the sliders and try to put in something a little bit nicer that's a little bit more in character with the design. I know you're going to look apartment here, but I think you can afford a couple moves like that. And then I think we want to carry forward the other comments that haven't been addressed yet.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Chris?
I'm kind of on the fence, I think, because, if you are walking from Orange Avenue and you get past the first house, you come across the open space in the backyard, it's going to feel like you're walking through the backyard to get to the front door. So, to me, I think I kind of like the way you've proposed it, but there is a risk of it feeling like the backyard, I guess. And so, if you do bring the quality of the entry up and you have the number there, it's a little more obvious, and it depends a lot on what the landscape is going to be. So I see the strength of what Don and Claire are saying about creating a porch, so to speak, on the side, but I'm kind of torn. So,
just to clarify, by your comment on depends on what the landscape means, do you mean like having the landscape guide you as well?
Well, I mean it feeling like a back patio with a front door in it, so to speak. I mean, there's a risk of it just feeling awkward and. Is this the back or the front? Obviously, if you have an address plaque there, that's going to feel like the front door, and then we're going, where's the back door? So, again, it's the shape of the patio, I think, is going to come into play, and the landscape is going to be key in terms of where it's directing you.
Okay. And I think that their comments about having an entry either there or here is I commensurate with that. One thing I did think of, I'd like you to think about is that, see how this is red and this is red? I wondered if you wouldn't make a connection between this door and that color, and then make a connection between this door and possibly an awning over this or whatever you do here, so that there's a visible connection between that color and the building in the back, and that this house is different. And I think that might help. So, okay. So we're open to a motion which will carry. Well, essentially, it will still carry number 3 again, because what we've done is given him the comments on it, and he'll come back again. So this would be 1 2-week continuation, or. Yeah,
that's 2 weeks.
So this would be a 2-week continuation, back to full board, carrying all the same items. Whoever the maker is. But essentially the same 4 items are there again, with the comments that we had that may reinforce number 3. I see Dawn studying it hard. Here you go, Dawn. Fire away.
I don't think I'm firing on all cylinders tonight as far as like my wording on everything, but I like what you said about just carrying forward all the comments, and with regards to number 3, we might just add that an option for the front door, or study an option for the front door at the east elevation
of the rear unit,
with an awning to signify the entry, and so that's that one. Then with regards to number 1, return with the preliminary landscape plan, it would an additional comment for number 1 would be to study how the landscaping is going to guide you to the entryway to the rear unit, and maintain the privacy of the private open yard space. That's my motion.
Okay, great. Do you have a second?
I'll second under discussion. Just a point of clarification: does this project require a landscape architect? I know we always talk about this, but
David?
It's a commercial project, so yes, it would need a licensed landscape person.
Would be yes. No?
Is it commercial?
Or
Two residential?
yeah, it's kind of in that gray area that I can never see through.
It's the board's, I mean, there is guideline to it. Usually, generally, the
reflects the amount of square footage of landscaping that's proposed. The board can always request a licensed landscape architect.
Well, I think that at the very least, the project merits a professionally prepared landscape plan, whatever that means. I mean, there's a lot of really good
Yeah, it's kind of
landscape
where
designers.
I'm going
I
as
think
a
you should just add that to the motion.
under discussion
and then
as a seconder, because I feel like this project is simple in the architecture and it works and it's good considering the type of project we're putting forth. I think what's really going to make this project work from a functional and livability standpoint now is going to be the landscaping, and I think it needs to be done by a professional.
Okay, so we add that board would like to see a professionally designed landscape plan.
Doesn't necessarily be licensed, we're saying
Professionally prepared. Okay. Very important. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Against. Motion carries.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll bring a conclusion to the ABR today. Good night, Santa Barbara.